NOAA releasing their spring outlook, able to get a look ahead at the long-term pattern and what the season might have in store for us.
Yesterday was the third day in a row of highs in the 80s, and yesterday we climbed well into the 80s in many spots, with some regions reaching the mid-80s. Now, when we go back and tally the number of 80-degree days since January 1st, it may not be surprising to you to note that this year has had one of the most number of 80-degree days basically since the beginning of the year. We've had 11 days in the 80s. That's the fourth most on record through March 23rd. Now, we're getting a little break in the 80s for a couple of days. Today, highs have been cooler, tomorrow as well, but then we expect the 80s to return for a couple of days again Thursday and Friday. And as we go through the spring months, we expect more of those 80-degree temperatures. We could very well keep that more active streak, if you will, of warmer than average temperatures. Our average high during the spring season is 78 degrees and our average low is 55. But keep in mind, that's a real rough average because it warms up tremendously as we go through the next couple of months anyway. So the fact is we're going to have more 80s, and eventually as we head toward May, probably our first 90s of the season. Looking in terms of rainfall, we're expecting to have wetter than average conditions finally across the southeast. At least that's the possibility from the Climate Prediction Center. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that might be. With that said, we're still in a drought, and we might kind of continue to see some of the drought persisting in some spots, especially across North Georgia and North Alabama. The hope is that the drought won't get any worse across parts of West Georgia and East Alabama. It may even go away in some spots. So hopefully we can continue to see some improvements in the drought as we go into the next few months around here. The problem is last year ended up being much drier than average. The winter was drier than average, so very dry soil conditions have set up across the area. This is likely to reduce our overall flood threat in the next few months. However, it doesn't mean that we can't have some heavy rain and flood events as we go into the spring. I think over the next couple months, we'll start to see the cold fronts that move through, well, maybe they'll stall out a little bit more, and that gives us some hope that we'll get some much needed rain at times around here. Plus, we usually start seeing the flow open up off the Atlantic and the Gulf at times, and that can give us some periods of rain at times. Although it's worth pointing out that in the next week to maybe 10 days, things stay fairly dry around the Chattahoochee Valley. We'll have to watch, though, as we go through the month of April for threats of severe weather. The precipitation outlook does not account for any threats of severe weather, but we know that April is our busiest month, climatologically speaking, in terms of severe weather threats. The odds of getting severe weather are the highest among any month. May, we start to usually see that early summer weather pattern eventually take hold, where the rain becomes a little spottier again. We'll see what the next few months bring, but it does look a little more promising in terms of some wetter weather at times, hopefully setting up here as we go into April, May, and June compared to average, and that would be promising in terms of hopefully the drought doesn't get any worse in our region.